I'm here with a really special guest who has not only personal experience in water polo, performing at the very highest level, but also coaching for many, many years. And so I'm really excited to have Paul Oberman as a special guest. Paul competed in water polo at the 1992 Summer Olympics in Barcelona. He has been the head coach of water polo at the Western Australian Institute of Sport, which is an institute of sport in Perth, Australia, designed to promote elite and world-class talent. I understand he has at least twice been named Coach of the Year at WAIS, the Western Australian Institute of Sport. And on 3 occasions, he was the assistant head coach for the men's Olympic team. So he has vast experience, and it's a real pleasure to have you with me today.
Thank you very much, Les. From the other side of the world.
Yeah. Good morning from Salt Lake and good evening in Perth. So maybe you can just elaborate, Paul, and talk a little bit about your background in water polo as a player, and then a little bit as what got you into coaching.
Sure. First of all, I started as I used to be a swimmer and had won many state championships here in Perth, and when I was 13, I probably got too small for swimming. Everyone seemed to grow, and instead of me winning and coming second at state championships, it was 5th and 6th. And very close friends of ours at the swimming club basically said, "Do you want to try water polo? You know, there are other kids, similar size. You're a good swimmer. We could do with you. We don't have enough players on the team. So would you like to have a try?" So yeah, that was really my very first inception into water polo, and it didn't take me very long. First year, I got named the best and fairest, MVP of the team, and as a 14-year-old, and very quickly, I suppose, went through the ranks of water polo in Western Australia and also Australia. One of the things that I hold very special to my heart is that I'm the only player in Australian water polo that has played for the Australian men's team before I played for my state team. So played for the US team before I played for Utah. Right. Or California. So, right. A very quick, rising to the elite squads, and that came through. I finished high school here in Western Australia and went to the Australian Institute of Sport, and that was pretty much springboard every part of my water polo career. Right through from playing at a World Junior Championships in my very first year there. National team a little bit later, World University Games, right through to the national team. And I'm very fortunate to have travelled the world as an athlete, seen many, many countries, many, many cities, 270 games for Australia over a very long period of time that unfortunately was short. Unfortunately, I had a couple of little injuries along the way, but one very severe one after the World Championships here in 1998. Went through a glass window and severed my ulnar nerve and of my shooting arm, in fact. And basically, I was written off. You were never going to make it. And it really, at the time, I was studying to be a primary school teacher, elementary school teacher, and threw all my focus into that, but also into, how I was going to get back if I was going to get back. And, I've got some, really good, I'll have a really good insight into, making it back. Unfortunately, you can see behind me, Sydney 2000, that was going to be the swan song. That was going to be the end. And unfortunately, in June, just a training accident, unfortunately, ruined my water polo playing career. And I suppose as a teacher, I had thrown myself into that, but meant I was also doing some coaching around the place, and that probably extended my water polo career into coaching, because I really saw that as giving back to the sport, but I had, a good way of speaking to the kids and getting them to understand and learn and giving them my experiences. And that's sort of, had a couple of years then coaching at at the UWA Torpedoes in the National League, and then went to Singapore and coached there for 2 years. And then the opportunity with the national team came up, and with Wace anyway. And my first year at Wace in 2009, the national body had said, how do you feel about coaching the Australian team at the World University Games? And I said, well, yeah, I'm happy. The national coach who I had played with in the national team previously had said, you do well, you come into the national team with us and, be part of the coaching staff. And so I did fairly well. We won the World University Games. So, in the end, it was a really good, nice little stepping stone, but, it made me develop, I suppose, some of the ways I go about coaching, the way I look at injuries, the way, we manage the program, and to try and be innovative and creative and keep up with the current trends of today.
Yeah. It sounds like you've obviously had a lot of success, both as a player and as a coach. You mentioned that you had a training injury in practice that cut your career short. Maybe you can elaborate on what it was and what happened.
Well, yeah, sure. So in 1992, we came fifth at the Olympics, and it was Australia's best ever result. It was fantastic. We had a fantastic team, well coached, really great. In those days, we didn't have physical therapists and those sorts of people come away with the team. We had a masseur, and that was it. And he was a really great resource for us on understanding our bodies and things like that. And come 1993, 1994, I started to not be able to straighten my throwing arm, and it was really becoming painful. So I saw the doctors at the AIS in Canberra, and they basically told me that there were some little floaty bits in my elbow and they needed to come out. So 3 operations later, we got those out, and it was back on the path of playing again, and everything was going fine. And after World Champs, as I said, 1998, I was pushing through a glass window going to university, and just completely under my arm here, severed my ulnar nerve. So there's a massive big scar there. We had 3 layers of stitching, underneath stuff, and then the muscle and whatnot, and then the fascia over the top, and then to cover it all over again, with the skin. And interestingly, at the time, they at the hospital, they just sort of said, well, this is how it is, away you go. So we'll stitch you up and away you go. And we got back to the AIS, and our doctor of the team at the time at the AIS basically came to the residence where my wife and I were living, and he said, how is it? What can you feel? And I said, I can't feel my little finger. And it sort of sticks out to the side nowadays. Can't feel my finger. And he said, oh, it looks like you've done some nerve damage. And so they said, back to the hospital the next day, and they opened me up again, opened up the scar, and went searching for the nerve, because they didn't reattach the nerve together. Yeah. And so, microsurgery and the whole wonders of the world, and reattached it, but I never got full feeling back in my hand. So on my throwing hand, I have sort of a line, classic down the side and then up the front. This side of it's numb. I don't have any feeling, and so it became a little difficult, but to play water polo and get back to where I wanted to. And I had, as I say, Sydney 2000 was the goal, and we worked really hard through recovery and physio, and just we threw everything at it that we could to try and stimulate the nerve growth, to try and get it back. And in 1999, I made it back to the national team, and scored 2 goals in my game back, and happened to be against the US, so I was pretty happy. And a tour that lasted sort of 10 days was fantastic, and I felt as though I was back playing. And later that year, I sort of was playing a game and felt a bit of a pain in my shoulder of the same arm, my shooting arm. And they had a look and they thought, well, to get you through the last little bit until Sydney, what we'll do is we'll just do a little bit of a tidy up, a bit of keyhole surgery and tidy up the labrum and things like that. So, and that worked.
Was your shoulder subluxing or dislocating, or?
Well, we didn't really know at the time. And it was just frayed around the outside. That's all they could see. They could see that. I mean, I was always a hypermobile, super flexible person, and so they then said, okay, well, we'll make sure that we get that done. And it happened to be in then June 2000. We were doing a training activity and just happened to go get the ball and go to shoot, and someone grabbed my arm. And obviously there was some weakness there because of the nerve and because of, not everything healing and being as right as it normally would be, when you first, are born and things like that. Unfortunately, it meant I fully dislocated and needed a full shoulder reconstruction. And so, 2 months before the Olympics, before the end, it was, pretty devastating. And, there's certainly some tears shed and some physical punches being thrown at blocks and, bricks and, the whole frustration of not fulfilling, a dream. Yeah. And, probably really sad for me was, I had my very first child there, my daughter. She was, it was going to be her first foray into seeing daddy play, and we had family friends had knitted, jackets with my number on it, and beanies, and the whole works. And unfortunately, wasn't to be. So sad story. But
did you feel? I mean, you mentioned it was quite emotional. Maybe you can just talk about some of the thoughts or feelings, if you can recall, kind of at the time after you dislocated your shoulder, kind of what was going through your mind.
Yeah. So the very first, when I dislocated it, I felt the pull. I felt the pull of my arm, and it wasn't going anywhere. It was almost like I had separated my body from my arm, and immediately I felt it released. And I went under the water and I sat on the bottom for maybe 10 seconds, in excruciating pain, just not knowing, why is this hurting so much? I don't understand what's just happened. And then coming up and then not being able to move it. It was sort of, sunk down and, yes, it was dislocated, but I'd also torn all the ligaments and tendons. And so I had really nothing holding it together. Yeah. And my brother happened to be on the team as well, and he picked me up, in the water and pulled me to the side, and with my free arm, he said, he sort of, I suppose, he sat behind me so I didn't fall back in the water, and I just was punching the block, the swimming block, just going, this hurts, this is so much pain. I didn't know what was happening. They got me out of the pool. Next thing I sort of remember is being at the doctor's surgery over at the AIS, at the Institute of Sport, and lying on one of the beds, and the Dr. Warren McDonald coming in and having a look at it. And I'm not sure how it, I don't even remember how it got relocated back into my shoulder. It's not something that I can recall. I just, there was an emotion of, what am I doing here now, lying in this bed? Yeah. How did this happen? Trying to rethink through what someone had said to me, what was done, whatever. I mean, I'm actually lying in my swimming costumes. This is it's 7 o'clock in the morning on the bed. So I literally walked, over to the doctor's area, and yeah, they then said, well, we need to get scans. We need to make sure that, we get this healed back properly. And it was really, for me, it was a really good insight into the caring nature. And yes, I was an athlete. Yes, I was an elite athlete, but I was still a person.
Yeah.
And the doctor and the nurse and all of those guys that were there at the time were, I had been there for a very long time at the AIS, and 14 years in fact, and they all knew me, and they were as heartbroken as I was that this was the end. Well, in effect, I was never going to come back in 2 months or 3 months to then play in Sydney. And so, after all of those injuries, I decided that, what, I came back, I gave it a really good shot. I'm really happy with what I've done in my career for water polo and the medals we've won, the experiences I have, the friends I made, that, I now have another page in life. I have a wife, I have a child, I have an occupation as a primary teacher at the time. And so it was, okay, well, that's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, really, really interesting at the time, because immediately I wanted to be part of the team still. A couple of days after surgery, I was probably struggling a little bit and in trying to understand everything and why I wasn't going to be part of the team. And I went and spoke to the head coach and said to him, I'd really like to be helping out with the team at the Olympics. Can I do it in some way? I'm happy to be the video person. I'm happy to be the manager, whatever it might be. And he basically said, no, there's nothing I can do for you. And I felt that was probably the only one time in the whole of my injury that I felt as though I'd been let down. That I had this wonderful career with the national team, and we'd achieved all the best results ever for Australia whilst I was in the starting lineup and whilst I was in the team. And it was like, this was my dream, and there was no way they were going to be able to help me, or no way that the head coach was going to be able to help me.
Was there any kind of rationale as to, or did you get any information or as to why you couldn't remain involved in some way? I mean, it sounds like you had obviously contributed greatly to the success, and you mentioned the doctors, and they shared your pain and frustration. So it's curious that the coach indicated that there was no way you could be involved.
I think because probably I was one of the senior athletes, he didn't want any distractions on the team. I think also that there was probably, and now me being, an assistant coach and team leader and those sorts of things that I understand a little bit better, there's probably not many, what do they call it, accreditations that they could have given me to be at the games as part of the team.
Right.
So I suppose, I was very fortunate in the end that there was a guy that I knew very, very well. He'd been the manager and referee, and been the manager of the national team and referee with the national team, and for a number of years. And he was going to be the head of the water polo at the Sydney Olympics. And so I then rang him, and I said to him, is there any way, I can be a part of this? Have you got a job for me that I can do, whether it's, cleaning the toilets or cleaning the change rooms after a game or doing something?
Yeah.
And he said he had heard that I'd been injured, and he was a fantastic guy, Ross Coggan. And he just sort of said to me, yep, I'm sure we can find something. Give me a day or two and give me a call back. And so, 2 days later, I gave him a call back, and he said, I've got a job for you. And I said, oh, yeah, what am I doing? And he said, you're going to be the team liaison officer for the Australian men and the Australian women. And I said, well, what do I have to do? And he goes, nothing. Just be there when they train.
Social
So
relations.
yeah, so in the end, it was that was actually my opportunity at the Olympics. Not as a player, not as a member of the team. It was my opportunity to contribute to the Olympics in
Yeah.
the end, and I really, really enjoyed it. I had a great time. The women won the Olympic gold medal. That was against the US in a very close game, and I got to see all of those events. I got to see all of the games. I got to see. I was very fortunate on the very first night of the swimming to see 3 Australian gold medals. So it was an experience that probably I would never normally have had.
Yeah.
And it was probably also the tonic that I needed as well to move on.
Yeah, I was going to ask, was it bittersweet in any way? I mean, you sound kind of very appreciative of the opportunity, and yet, which seems impressive to me, because, after coming back from that, the nerve damage, and you were on the path again, you made the national team, you had scored 2 goals, you mentioned, at a competition, and then to just sort of have the dislocation happen. I mean, was that experience of being there as a liaison bittersweet in some way?
No, I wouldn't say bittersweet at all. I would say it was all just sweet. I might have been. I suppose I might have been a little bit bitter towards the head coach, in not allowing me. But the assistant coach and the staff and the athletes appreciated everything I did for them.
Yeah.
They understood, obviously, how that this was heartbreaking for me, and they made every effort to talk to me every day. How you going? What are you up to today? One of the players even lent me his car for the 2 weeks while I was up there, so I could travel around.
Yeah.
I'd see it as I was just really, really lucky, really, really lucky to have that experience, to have people looking out for you, to know and understand how much time, effort, to me, if you're a good person, people will look after you.
Yeah. So the fact, it sounds like you had a lot of support or people that cared about you,
Mm.
and as you mentioned, kind of shared in your experiences and success over the years, and was that helpful in kind of dealing with the experience of the injury?
Yeah, I think so, and I think probably one of the really important factors of me being able to deal with, I suppose, the number of injuries and move on quickly. I didn't dwell too much on them. I didn't ho hum like some athletes might. It was my wife who is a netballer, a little bit different to basketball, but is a netballer. And her very first year, I met her at the AIS, and her very first year, she had to have a knee reconstruction. Typical for netballers, they do ACLs, PCLs, sometimes the whole lot. And for me to see the pain, the excruciating pain that she had been through dealing with her injury, and to me, we're talking about hers was an injury that would walk. So she's having to use it every day to get around. I was fortunate; it was a shoulder. I didn't need to use it. I very quickly learnt how to use my right hand. But my wife was my inspiration on saying, well, you've got to deal with this. We got married in 1994, and I think it was 1989 or 1990 that she first did a knee. So I'd seen her rehab it and go through, as I say, that pain and all of the heartache. I mean, she was slated to be one of the better netballers going around. You know, was she going to make a national team? Well, who really knows? But you know, she continued to have a very long career in netball. You know, not only in Canberra but in New South Wales, where she was from, and played many years on the television games, and part of the professional, I suppose, starting of the sport. And so, you know, for me to have her side by side, going through it all, and then again, really lucky to have the medical facilities that we had at the Australian Institute of Sport. You know, the doctors, the physios, the psychologists, you know, the biomechanists that we worked with on you know, trying to get my shot back, you know, my throwing action correct. Yeah, just and and the number of splints we had to make, just everything, you know. And it was always done with a smile. It was always done with me appreciating the work that they had done, and to say thank you. You know, yes, it's their job, but you know, to get me back to where I needed to be, I was, you know, super appreciative, and you know, always made sure it was a, you know, a thank you for your effort.
Well, I think that's a great point, that even though it was their job, that, you know, to realize and understand that you had access to, you know, world-class treatment providers and facilities. And also sounds like your wife was a great role model, having been able to observe, as you said, the pain that she went through and kind of the steps that she took, I imagine, to recover from her ACL injury. Probably not easy. I just want to go back to your shoulder briefly. Having dislocated my shoulder numerous times in wrestling, I can appreciate the physical pain and the confusion that it causes when it happens, and the uncertainty. Of course, in wrestling, you're on a mat, not in water, and not floating to the bottom of a pool where you're sitting for 10 seconds. But maybe you can just tell me, like, you said that there was, I think, 2 or 3 months before the games. So was there some period where you were kind of uncertain as to, okay, is this something that I can recover from in time? Can I do rehab? I mean, you mentioned that a couple of days later you were in surgery. So maybe you can just convey some of the information that you got after you dislocated it.
Sure. So immediately after dislocating, you know, again, fortunate with the services that we had around IS, you know, imaging clinics and those sorts of things, to MRIs, CT scans, to really work out what the problem was, and what needed to be done. And I was really fortunate to have those world-class doctors and physiotherapists and those sorts of people around to help me make really informed decisions. And you know, I think one of the things I was lucky with was, again, the education that those people had given me through understanding my shoulder, through the movements, through my whole career of the biomechanics of shooting actions and those sorts of things, that you know, I understood what it meant, you know, what needed to be fixed. And you know, shoulder dislocations in water polo are fairly uncommon. You know, it's almost a little bit of sacrosanct that you don't, as someone's shooting, you don't grab their arm. And unfortunately, you know, a training accident happens. But you know, we got in this, had the scans, and fairly soon afterwards we were into surgery. You know, I'd say probably within the week. And you know, once they'd been into the surgery, we then found out how much damage really had been done. And unfortunately, I was told it was going to be 9 months until you were going to probably be, you know, rehabbed back to some sort of full fitness.
Yeah.
And so it was very quick then for me to make the decision to say, you know what, that's it.
Yeah.
You know, and I was actually okay with it. I was okay with it.
So, like, the fact that you were told 9 months, and it, you know, was there this realization, okay, it's just not feasible to do this in 2 months, or kind of, I guess, what helped you move to that point where quickly you could be okay with it or accept it.
Yeah, there was no way that the 9 months could have been turned into 2. Absolutely no way. There was too much damage in there. As I say, there was, they had to reattach ligaments and tendons, and I'd torn pretty much everything that there was to be done. Sew up the labrum and, big labral tears in there that, they just said, no, you're going to I think I was in a sling for nearly 2 months.
Yeah.
So, without having to move it, those sorts of things. And plus also, I was 31 years old at the time. And whilst it might not seem old, it was, that was, I felt, a really good career. To be on the national team for nearly 12, 13, 14 years, to see that, there was some younger athletes coming through that I was still desperately trying to hold off. But also knowing, and one of the things I really stress to the athletes that I have today from learning of my experiences is that, water polo is never going to pay your way in life unless you're really, really lucky. You become a professional athlete and go to Europe and play there. And the reality is we have, 2, 3 maybe in Australia that go there and play professionally.
Yeah.
So you have to have some education behind you. You have to have a trade. You have to have a life behind you. Otherwise, you got nothing.
Yeah.
An injury can make and break you, and then you're back on mum and dad's doorstep, and they're having to fend for you. And I suppose, leaving home at 17 and a half and going to Canberra, I grew up pretty quick and, became wise about what I needed to do. And after 11 years, I finally finished my primary elementary teaching degree. And, I was, in my second year of working.
Yeah.
And I had a great school that was looking after me and making sure that I had, time off when I needed to, that I started later in the morning. And that was sort of my, I suppose, duties other than teaching, our dot time and my time off during the day. So, again, I don't harbor any ill feelings, any anger and those sorts of things, to the injury and to the process. It was more, It's more a case of, I feel really lucky that, I've been through it and I have those experiences that I can, put on to the kids of today to really explain to them, hey, schooling's important. Education's important. If it's not that, getting a trade, finding something you really love and enjoy doing, because, you're probably going to be doing it for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Water polo is going to be there. You can play water polo until you're 80, but you can't earn money, at that age playing water polo.
Yeah. So sort of this realization that, there's a finite period of time generally that one can have a competitive career, after which you're probably going to need to do other things to make a living. But it also sounds like the fact that, or would you say that you had already had kind of a successful career? You indicated you were 31 at the time of this shoulder dislocation. Did that make it easier to come to terms with or accept and kind of quickly move on from the injury because you had already had such a successful and long career?
A little bit, yeah. I think it certainly helped. I mean, I had that Sydney aspiration to finalise my career as such. Look, I think the finalisation and the realisation of it all was really, I didn't have to think too hard about it.
Yeah.
In the end.
You mentioned, Paul, that you got information and education about your shoulder and what had happened. And I'm wondering if that's important for injured athletes to get information and education about their injury.
Yeah, so it's, I suppose when I first went to Canberra, not knowing me as an athlete, I didn't know the difference between being injured and being sore. And so we had, you know, stability sessions, mobility sessions, rehab sessions, prehab sessions. And the good part about it was you were explained why you were doing this. You know, we're doing this exercise because this is going to help your shoulder stability. We're going to do this to help your internal and external rotation that helps your shoulder stay in the joint, get stronger, you know, those sorts of things. And you know, I always had an interest of, you know, wondering what was under the skin, what was there. And, you know, for me then, you know, I'm not going to say I was a regular in physio, but, you know, I would go there and always ask the physiotherapist, you know, why am I getting that pain? And then they would explain, you know, you've got it because your teres minor too tight and it's pulling your shoulders back, and your traps are too tight, so you're shrugging up, and that's then causing you to, you know, your shoulders to then roll forward. So to me, that education, you know, and that understanding, you know, passed on to you by the physiotherapist really, helps you understand, okay, well, you know what, if I've got a torn labrum, it's not going to be good. My shoulder is going to pop out all the time.
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, having it's really important. And also, you know, even through biomechanists and those guys, you know, being able to analyze your own shot by saying, you know, you're not rotating enough, which is making you, you know, try to muscle the ball a little bit more. So you're using your chest muscles too much rather than, you know, naturally flowing. And, you know, so you've got to develop some rotation. And, you know, then being given broomsticks in the gym to then say, okay, well, this is what you need to do. You know, you need to rotate, you need to stretch, you need to do a whole heap of exercises to get that rotation. You know, so looking at all of those things and you know, probably in the end, the other thing that's really important is understanding then the timelines and the time frames on how things are, you know, heal themselves. You know, we as athletes, and I suppose coaches as well, being one now, that, you know, we love to be back there now.
Right. Right.
You know, we get injured and we want to be back in the water. We want to be back exercising, and you know, having the reliance on the doctors and the physiotherapists and the experts of the field, really trusting them and believing in them that they're doing the right thing by you, and having those time frames to say, well, you know, you're not going to be throwing in 3 months' time. You know, you're probably going to be throwing in 9 months' time. That's provided you do all the little bits, all the exercises, or, you know, every day, twice a day, whatever it might be. So,
Right. So did those, when you get that information about, you know, like maybe how your movement might be contributing to a problem or an issue, for instance, or how you might modify certain patterns or actions, does that then, you know, you've mentioned also kind of these timelines. When you get that information, does that feed into an athlete's expectations of their recovery and kind of where they should be or what's reasonable in terms of time frames?
yeah, I think as I said, you know, athletes want to be back sooner rather than, you know, they don't like to be sitting on the sidelines. And you know, having that information, you know, to me it helped. And I certainly, as a coach now, you know, we have, you know, hip injuries nowadays. It seems to be the latest thing going around in water polo. And you know, I'm not going to say I'm cautious, but I believe that the doctors and the physios, those guys have done, you know, the surgery, performed the exercises, performed the services, you know, required. I believe they have a really good idea on, you know, how long it's going to take, and for me, not to, you know, feel as though, okay, well, we've got this timeline that says they need to be back in a month. Well, if they're not, I'm not getting upset about it. I'm just saying, okay, well, why aren't they getting back in a month? And it comes then back to the athlete. Have you been doing your exercises? What's holding it up? And if we need to extend it you know, a week, 2 weeks, well, we just extend it out. I really, you know, looking at my career and the number of injuries I had, I was never pressured to come back early. It was always a case of, me learning from the coaches I had, that they believed in the physio, they believed in the doctor, they believed in the diagnosis, to then say, yeah, now's time. Don't go back early. So yeah.
Would you say then it's important that athletes do not get pressured to come back or to meet certain time frames, but to kind of just adjust those time frames to the individual and their recovery?
I think so, definitely, because everyone's going to be different. How I might recover from a shoulder reconstruction to yourself recovering from a shoulder reconstruction are probably going to be very different.
We were talking a little bit about timelines, and if an injured athlete gets a time frame of a certain number of weeks, whether they're able to adjust if things are not going according to that time frame, or how they respond.
And one of the I suppose critical factors we had at the Australian Institute of Sport was we also had, along with the medical team, we had sports psychologists, and they were very helpful in helping you, I suppose. I mean, I call it now shoeboxing, helping to understand why things might not be working, why things are working, but also shoeboxing in the sense that, there's nothing you can do right now at this given time to make your shoulder any better. You can think about it all you like, you can try and force it, but it's not going to make it go any faster. Mm-hmm. And so you need to then move on to the next, not necessarily the next stage in your life, but to concentrate on what it is that you're doing outside as well. It might be, for me it was my university, for me it was then also my wife, spending time with family, having a really well balanced life that helped me. If 4 weeks didn't become 4 weeks, well, that was okay. I was okay with it because I wasn't apprehensive about making sure that it was going to be quicker, or if it was going to be longer, well, maybe that I was just getting older and it was taking a little bit longer to heal.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the things the doctors had said to us as well, is that, you're not a young person anymore. When you're 19, it's going to heal, 18, you're going to heal much quicker than when you're 30 and 40.
Right. So kind of speaking to people like the sports psychologist, it sounds like that kind of help you how to think about, or you could approach the injury and the information that you were getting, and kind of how to frame that experience. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, how to deal with it. You don't always have a good day. There are days when, things just don't work. Yeah. Well, you need to learn how to deal with that. I'm constantly talking to my girls about, there are days when nothing goes right for you. Well, there's days in the office or, further down the track in life that things aren't going to go well. And how do you handle that? Yeah. You can't just sort of sit in the corner and think that, ho hum and, someone wave the magic wand and everything will be okay. Right. Because that's not reality.
So would you say that how the athlete responds to or reacts to their injury has implications for the effectiveness of their recovery?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think psychologically it can have a big effect. They can certainly feel as though it's hurting, it's injured all the time, it's not getting any better. But having a positive outlook on it, in my opinion, it's going to then make you probably come back, probably a little bit stronger, a little bit more resilient, a little bit more ready to play. You know, if you're standoffish and you're not really sure how things are going, you don't have that information, you don't see a psychologist, you don't help yourself, then things don't all work out to plan, and you're a little bit lost.
Yeah.
And so having all of those different areas contributing to you to help you understand, to work within the realms that you have, certainly can make you, you know, get back quicker.
Right. So, and I was going to say, what are some of the things that contribute or help an athlete have a positive attitude in the face of injury?
One of the things that my doctor actually said to me is, this is not the end of the world. It's you know, it's just a speed bump in the road. And so, you know, to have that positive outlook is okay, what am I going to do today? And how does that look? You know, I'm going to, for example, you know, the biomechanist is going to come down to training today, and he's going to have a look at my shot and see what it looks like. And is that going to be a bad thing? Well, no, because I'm going to look at the past footage and to see how I've improved, to see how it's got better, to see what I can do then better to make it better. You know, I need to rotate a bit more. I need to throw my shoulder back a little bit further. You know, having that sort of feedback, that visual feedback for you, to have, you know, everything all the way down to the physiotherapist to say, hey, look how much further, look how much more flexibility you have in your shoulder. To have that constant communication with the doctor to say, hey, shoulder looks good. It's, you know, it looks like it's got some more bulk. It's a bit stronger doing, you know, the resistance to an internal or an external rotation. Having the psychologist, you know, talking about, you know, how do you feel? You know, does it feel like the same as before? You know, how you're dealing with this. Did you have a bad day? Did you not have a bad day?
So again, kind of getting that information and kind of being proactive in speaking and accessing the different resources, particularly it sounds like in an institute of sport where athletes have access to those resources, can contribute to generating or facilitating a positive mindset with the recovery.
Yeah, for sure.
What would you say, Paul, are some of the challenges or uncertainties that an athlete faces once they experience an injury?
Yeah, and I probably went through it immediately, was it's the end of the world. It's over. You know, having that, and that unfortunately, you know, can be realistic. Can be, you know, that's the end of my career. You know, comparing an Olympic, you know, top of the world, you know, end of their career versus a youth athlete. But I think also, you know, they think when they're going through the recovery process, they're also thinking, am I going to be good enough? Am I still going to be strong enough like I used to be? Am I going to get back to where I was? I hope I don't lose my spot on the national team, or I hope I don't lose my position. You know, some athletes get really bored with the whole slow progress of it all. So it's then, you know, and critically, like we've spoken a lot about, is not actually understanding the injury itself.
Yeah. So when an athlete has all those kind of questions about the implications, like how will this impact my career? Am I going to be on the national team or play at the same level or execute my skills? How, as a coach, do you help them manage those thoughts, or are there ways to help them deal with those uncertainties?
I think just, you know, giving them some guidance to say, you know, your shoulders, using the shoulder as an example, you know, it's not going to be the same as what it used to be. But you can work on different areas now. You know, you can work on, making defense a priority for now. You can work on the strength of your legs. You can work on, getting stronger, becoming a faster swimmer. Working on the perceived weaknesses that you might have to help you improve to become a better overall player when you come back.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I understand water polo is one of the most physically taxing events. I think I recall reading or coming across a study where they did the VO2 max of all the Olympic athletes in one of the Olympiads. And I think it was water polo had the highest, and I think wrestling had the second highest. But for those unfamiliar with the sport, maybe briefly you can just describe some of the physical demands of water polo.
So in a game of water polo, we probably swim upwards of 3 kilometers in a game. And you're moving from into a bit like a basketball game. Everyone moves. It's not like, besides the goalkeeper, everyone moves into attack. Everyone moves into defense. When there's a foul, the clock stops. So it's not running time. It's an actual time. And so it's 8 minutes of, moving into attack and having a little bit of a wrestle and a push and shove with your opposition and trying to get the better of them, into sprinting back to the other end to stop, a possible counter attack, and then moving on your legs to block a shot, moving on your legs to get in between players. It's a difficult game to actually explain.
Yeah.
It's a lot of swimming, a lot of vertical to horizontal movements, a lot of jumping, a lot of aerial stuff, all the while trying to follow a ball around and score a goal.
Right. And am I correct that there's also a lot of jostling under the water that you can't see from the audience perspective?
There is, at the highest level, there's probably not as much. There'll still be a little bit of holding for sure. I don't think, our sport is a little bit based on what the referee can't see you get away with. Yeah. So, there's a little bit of holding of the costumes. There's a little bit of holding of the arms. And realistically, you have some guys who are 80 kilograms matching up against some guys who are 120 kilograms. So there's can be a big weight disparity between the two athletes as well. And, one can swim, 54 seconds for 100 meters freestyle, and the other one swims 1 minute and 5. So, right. There's lots of physical, disparities between the players themselves as well.
Yeah. Just in terms of, so it sounds like particularly for injury, it's not an easy game, I would imagine, to come back to, given all of the kind of elements and demands that you just articulated. Maybe you can talk just a little bit about the role of athlete motivation in injury recovery.
Yeah, I suppose the motivation itself is a really interesting topic. One of the first things I ask an athlete is, what do you want to achieve? What is their motivation behind being at training? And I think you would then have also the same conversations with those athletes who are injured. What is your motivation? It's very sad when you have an athlete there who doesn't really want to be there. They don't want to be there at 6 o'clock in the morning, coming down, throwing a ball, those sorts of things. So what is that motivation of the athlete first? What do they really want to achieve? What is the level of achievement that they want? I always say I coach at a local club, and I say success for every single one of you is going to be different. For you, success is going to a national championships. Success for you is making a national team. Success for you is actually getting in the game next week and playing 5 minutes. that's deemed success. So the motivation behind, the role of motivation behind an injury is, what do you want to do? Do you want to get back to the level you were at, or do you want to get back to, just playing socially? And to get back to the level, you were at, it's going to take time. It's going to be hard. It's going to be, a really, heavy load that you're going to need to have lots of resources, lots of guidance, lots of help, because for sure you'll go through ups and downs. And as a coach, your role then, helping these athletes, is to roll a little bit with the punches, as they say, to help them understand that, yes, it's a bit of a bad day, but hey, we've made so many gains at this point in time to get back to this point. Let's not throw it all away today. Or good case, we've had, lots and lots of gains. Let's actually leave it today. Let's leave it today and say that's enough. We're in a really good position. And I think, the motivation of an athlete and a coach, to really get back to that space of where you're at, it's a crucial part to be really positive about it.
Right. So I guess why is it so crucial or important for the athlete to really know kind of what they want to achieve or what success means to them? How does that translate in terms of their recovery, or how does that specifically have an impact on their recovery?
Well, I think understanding where they want to be is going to set what their goals and their time frames and those sorts of things of recovering from the injury. Mm-hmm. To become just the lay person and a social player again, you're probably talking about a shoulder reconstruction taking 12 months. A little bit longer than the normal injury, because they're not going to be as motivated to really be vigilant about doing all their exercises, their prehab work, their rehabilitation work. And so having that understanding and being, really critically understanding what it is that you want. I think, I have, lots of other athletes that, they're not injured, but they have motivation, varying levels of motivation. Some of it is because mum and dad want you to be there. Mum and dad want you to go to an Olympics, and, or it's the coach wants to coach their first Olympian, or, coach the state championship team, or, something like that. Yeah. But it's always got to be, for me, it's always about the athlete and about them verbalizing to me, what is it that, they want? Yeah. How do they want to come out of all of this?
Right. So when they're able to verbalize that to you, it sounds like that has value or implications in terms of their actions, in terms of like how diligent they are in taking the steps they need to get to that particular goal, or just how much, I guess, energy they're putting in towards that, reaching that goal.
Yeah, for sure. I think, that, and them verbalizing it also in their own head makes them understand that's what I'm after. It's really easy for some athletes to say, yeah, I want to go to the Olympics. But for them to say, I want to go, my very first question back to them is, do you want to go, or do you want to have an impact? The Olympics is a very special event. It's the best athletes in the world all competing, one time in 4 years. And for them to, verbalize, I want to go to the Olympics and I want to, win an Olympic gold medal, you're going, okay, I know now that this athlete is committed. They're motivated to do it. They're going to be dedicated. And so my role then as the coach is to every time, I don't want to see the athlete fail. I don't want to see them, miss out. So my role is then to support them in everything that they're doing to try and help them strive to achieve their goal.
Right. So it sounds like when the athlete can express themselves, what they're trying to achieve, that there's some clarity or on
Mm.
their part, or you mentioned it's helpful for them to be able to express it for themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and also you touched on that point about feedback, and it sounds like, um, you know, as a coach, are you kind of meeting with your athletes to document their progress?
Yeah, so for us, whether it be injury or not injury, we meet as I suppose my team. We meet once a was it once a month? Yeah, and we evaluate everyone's performance, and we're not only evaluating their competition performance, but it's their strength and conditioning, how they've applied themselves to that. Are they making gains? And their psychological performance. Their the new one is athlete and well-being and engagement. How are they doing outside of their sport? We also have their physical health. So, how many sessions have they missed through to sickness or injury? So we're always evaluating them, basically based on, I have a meeting at the very beginning of their scholarship year that we sit down and do their individual performance plan.
Uh-huh.
And that's when we talk about everything. We have an open, a clean slate to work with that says, okay, what is it you want to do? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your opportunities? What are threats for you? How did you evaluate your previous season? What do we want to achieve this season? How are we going to do that? We can have, I want to make the Australian junior team. Well, that's good, but how are you going to do that? And having them understand the processes that sit behind it.
Right.
And, for them, one of the boys might be, yes, to make the Australian junior team. Well, he needs to be the number one or the number two centre back in Australia for his age group. And that means not allowing, easy centre forward goals. It means, swimming at a certain pace. It means, a whole range of things. And that could then also mean, meeting with nutritionists to make him possibly a little bit heavier, to lose a little bit more weight, to work with the strength and conditioning person to then look at, well, we need to add, we need to do some more squat work to help with your egg beater kick and those sorts of things. So it's really a long process, and having that those monthly meetings certainly helps me in engaging with the athletes to really refocus on what are we here for, what do we need to do, where haven't we gone well, and that's sometimes a reality that we haven't gone well, we haven't done what we've needed to do in the sense of our physical preparation, or we haven't engaged properly with the performance psychologist or the athlete and well-being, and our outside of water polo life might be suffering a little bit. We haven't got that that good balance.
Yeah. It sounds like communication between you and the athlete is important in terms of monitoring their goals and their progress. And I'm wondering, with respect to injury in particular, uh, is the communication between the athlete and yourself all the more important in the case of injury, or maybe you can speak in terms of communication as it relates to the injured athlete?
Yeah, we have right now a young goalkeeper that has gone in for some hip surgery, and and that was 2 weeks ago. I think we've communicated every second day already. How are you going? To not only for me to find out information, but for him to know I care about him. That I'm not just the coach that wants you to play in goals. I care about you. Pardon me. I care about you. I care about what you're doing, how you're going about it. Are they motivated to do their exercises each day? You know, do you want to catch up for a coffee to, you know, have a chat about things? Then add the athlete and wellbeing counsellors then to give him a call to check in on him. So I think that communication is really critical for the athlete to know someone cares about them, that they care about their situation, especially for the injured athlete.
Why is it important for the injured athlete to know that the coach, for instance, cares about them beyond just their sport performance?
They're a human being. They're a human being. You know, there's lots of things we don't like doing in life, but, you know, it's funny, you know, we talk about Facebook these days. And Facebook, you know, they have likes, ticks, and, you know, happy faces and all of these things. And it's almost as though we've gone away from me saying to you, well, you've done a great job. You know, it's now just a thumbs up, you know, and that, I think that personalized feedback to the athlete, you know, helps them move forward. You know, I think, you know, we as a human race have lost a lot of our communication skills and not being able to talk with people. It's talk to a machine these days, and talk to a phone, and, you know, give a tick or a cross, or, you know, an angry face, or, you know, we abbreviate letters and sayings and everything as well. And I think, you know, having the good old conversation is really critical to making sure that, you know, people understand. Yes, I'm providing some guidance. Yes, I'm helping you. Yes, I care about you. And you know what? I value the athlete. I value the athlete. I value the time and effort they're putting in.
Right. And just sort of having that kind of human conversation, as opposed to, as you say, just like a like, or, you know, an emoji, whatever it might be, can sort of reach the person, of course, in a more profound way than some of these sort of superficial forms of communication. And I guess we could go onto a whole discussion about the irony of these platforms designed to increase communication, which may ultimately or ironically be undermining it. But just a few other questions. I guess in terms of the communication between the athlete and the treatment provider, what is it important that the athlete, or what skills does the athlete need to optimize their communication with the physician or the physiotherapist?
Well, I think firstly, one, understand the injury. Two, probably understand the process, what it needs, what it will, you know, what it is to get back to whatever level of success they're thinking. But it's also the clarity of the injured athlete to really ask the questions to give them the understanding. I think too many times, you know, unfortunately, you know, doctors and physiotherapists, you know, they do sometimes have a language of their own. And, you know, doctors, you can't read their writing anyway, but I think it's, you know, to ask the question, well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Because if you're asking me to do that, well, secondly, not only what does it mean, but why? How is that going to help me get back? So really have, again, the communication between the athlete and the physician, or the physiotherapist, and those people to understand the how, what, why am I doing it? I mean, once we have, as the injured athlete, all of that knowledge, we can then synthesize it, analyze it, and say, okay, well, this is why it's good for me.
Right. So it's important for the athlete to get to ask questions and get information, as you say, about the how, the what, and the why, so that they're clear on, you know, the steps they need to take to understand why they're doing what they're doing. And sometimes you also mentioned, I guess, if maybe the terminology is jargon filled, then that might mitigate or reduce the likelihood that the athlete has clarity. but it sounds like it's important for the athlete to emerge with clarity from those conversations. Would that be accurate?
Yes, for sure. To have that clarity to understand what it is that's needed. You know,
Okay.
the physiotherapist, physical therapist might say you need to strengthen your teres minor. You know, so you need to do this activity. And so the athlete very simply says, well, what does that mean? What is my teres minor? What does it do? How is it going to help my shoulder strength? And how doing this activity, explain the activity, explain the exercise. And then, you know, it's then a case of, you know, not everyone learns by listening. You know, some learn by seeing, so they might watch a video. Some learn by touch. So it's like a case of, okay, my teres minor's here. Oh, if I do that, oh yeah, I can feel it moving. You know, to really understand that, or have the physio say, well, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get your scapular stability. So squeeze your shoulder blades together. Oh, okay, yeah. Now do this activity. See how when you do that after a certain amount of time, they start to float out. Well, you haven't got good shoulder stability. So we need to continually be practicing those exercises to help you with that.
Right.
So having
So
that clarity for sure.
would you say, Paul, it's important for the athlete to also know or understand how they learn best, and then to even ask for that kind of information? So, you know, you mentioned, like, if the athlete is a visual learner, could the athlete, or would the encouragement to be for the athlete to say, could you show me a picture of
Yep.
that? Or, like, is that
Yeah.
relevant?
And that was one of the things that really helped me, is that they had all of these models, you know, little shoulder models. There's the bone, here's the muscle, here's this, here's that. And for me to see that, and for then the physio to go bang and pull it apart and say, this is what you did, and see how this broke, and we've got to put it all back together. And that, to me, having it there and seeing it was invaluable. You know, I then really understood, okay, yep, I now know what it is that I need to do.
Right. So it sounds like sort of having them actually walk you through visually really cemented your understanding of what occurred, and, as you say, what the progression was thereafter.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit about how is it decided that an athlete is ready, let's say, to resume competitive play?
Yeah, I had this discussion probably 2 weeks ago with my performance psychologist. One of the athletes a year ago had some shoulder surgery, and he's been really apprehensive about putting himself into a shooting position in case he gets tackled from the side, you know, attacked by somebody, whatever it might be. And he's not ready. He's not physically, he's physically ready, but he's not mentally ready. And to me, having you know, those athletes experience it in the water by themselves individually, so slowly building them up by doing it themselves, having some, I suppose, opposition, not attacking them, not coming anywhere close to them, but just having them around, feeling the sense of there's somebody around me, but I'm having a shot and it's okay. Feeling then the sense of the defenders then coming towards me. So putting them into a gradual progression of, this is what might happen in a game. This is how things will look. You know, having them come from front on, having them come from side on. Then having a chaser coming from behind and then taking the shot, will all at some stage increase the belief and the trust in the athlete that, yeah, my shoulder or my injury will be okay and will stand up to it. I think also one of the things that we use a lot here in Australia is we use dynamometers and things to measure shoulder strength and groin strength and leg strength. And we've got some really good parameters on what levels are safe, strong levels for your shoulder. We regularly on a what is it, probably 2-month basis, have the athletes all regularly test those do the dynamometer tests on the internal and external rotations. And we've found that when the measures get lower, they start to get some shoulder impingement, or they become to lose strength in there, and it's shown in their shot. And once that starts to happen, they're then prone to a possible injury. Doesn't mean they're going to get the injury, but they're prone to a possible injury. So, we then, look at their strength and conditioning program, add some stability exercises, looking at all of those things, but all with the focus of making sure the athlete is then comfortable in being able to use that limb in a situation and progressing it to feel as though, as I'm coming out of the injury, I'm getting stronger and better, and I'm ready to then play.
Right. So is it important that the athlete has that belief that they're ready to play?
Yeah, definitely. Otherwise, they're going to, in a game of water polo, sit on the side. They're not really going to engage in the game. They're not going to feel as though they're a contributor to the game. They then see themselves as, well, I used to be able to, score goals. I used to be in the mix, doing things, but I'm feeling a bit, not great about myself. And I think that's a very telltale sign of, there's some performance psychological needs there, and not that, I really don't like saying that they have psychological issues. I think that it's more a psychologist is there, or a performance psychologist is there to give the athlete tools to help deal with something. Yeah. It's not that they've got a problem. It's giving them the tool to help them deal with the thing that they can't feel, the thing that they can't do at that time.
Right. So if for some reason there isn't the belief in the ability to execute tasks and skills in different competitive situations, then it sounds like that translates into more apprehension, or, I think you mentioned, they're less likely to engage in certain situations, and then that has negative consequences for their belief about their abilities or their performance. But also, you kind of mentioned that when you use some of those strength tests, that then translates into the movement patterns. And it sounds like if they're deficient on the strength test, then more often than not, you can also see that in terms of its impact on how they maybe throw the ball, yep, or engage in certain behaviors.
I think also, and just on that, I think also, Les, that it gives them, when their levels sort of decrease, they're not as strong as what they previously were. I think then they also look inside themselves to say, hey, there's something going wrong with my shoulder right now. Mm-hmm. And they then sort of, you would see them in a game not really having that impact that they would normally have either.
Yeah. And you mentioned sort of this one player that had shoulder injury, and I think you indicated that sort of physically there were indications that he was ready, but maybe not psychologically. So I wonder, do the kind of physical readiness and psychological readiness typically coincide, or not necessarily?
I think that, obviously we do a lot of physical preparation. And to me, how much physical preparation you do to be able to perform at a certain level, you have to do an amount of psychological preparation to be as effective as well. You've got to train your mind as well as training your body. Mm-hmm. And one of the big things with this athlete was, he was, I'm not going to say he was a big guy, but he was very much a bravado guy that, oh yeah, I'm okay. But didn't want to engage in, how's your shoulder? Discuss it, really engage in the process of it all. It was just a case of, I want to get it stronger and better and I'll be back.
Right.
And so he got it strong. and then found that, hang on, I'm coming back into the sport, but I'm not sure if I want to be back. Yeah. But I also feel as though he was very much, people got a little bit bigger. I mean, we're talking about a 17-year-old. He's now 19, and everyone's a little bit bigger, and he's playing men's water polo now, not junior water polo. And so there's that psychological aspect to it, that everyone's just that little bit stronger. Yeah. There's that everyone's a little bit faster. I have to think a little bit quicker. And so the athlete then never really engaged with psychology, or engaged with, athlete and well-being, or all the different areas to understand it, but to put his mind at a little bit of ease to say, you're ready, but we didn't engage that.
Right. So it's important for the athletes to sort of not only just address the physical elements of their recovery and sort of being physically ready to return, but also to address the psychological elements, or, to consider, mental preparation that will help them sort of resume at a high level. You've talked a little bit about this, I think, with your own injury experience, but one of my final questions relates to whether there are any benefits to injury.
Huge. It's a sad thing to say, but there are huge benefits to injury. Huge benefits. For me, in my initial injuries, it was to understand. I got so much out of sitting on the side. Yes, I wasn't physically in the water doing it with the guys, but I watched so many more games of water polo. I understood more about the sport. I became a student of the sport, as an athlete. I then was able to then contribute in different ways to the sport as well by becoming a referee. So at training games, I wasn't able to play, but I was able to contribute in understanding the rules, refereeing the games, understanding then when I got back in the water, hey, this is what you can't do. So, looking at that, video analysis was at the end of my career was starting to come in big time, with all the different video analysis programs and sports coding and whatever. And for me then to be videoing and coding and looking at cutting it up, having pieces ready for me to then look at, well, this is how a centre back played in this game, or watching, other teams and their strategies, really helped me, as I say, become a real student of the sport.
Yeah. It sounds like certainly there were some upsides, although, as you mentioned, no athlete necessarily wants to be sitting on the sidelines. It sounds like you took it as a chance to learn and really kind of study and analyze the sport. Would you say there's, we've talked about a number of different factors that influence an athlete's recovery, whether it's motivation or support or getting information, the trust in one's treatment providers. Would you say there are factors that distinguish the trajectory that athletes take in their recovery? So those who seem to have a successful return, however one defines success, or those who seem unable to do that? Are there differences in those paths that athletes take after an injury?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that psychological aspect. Do they want to be back? And a number of those athletes that, do get back to the top, or do become very successful in their sporting career, they've really understood it all. They've been really vigilant in completing the programs, the treatments, the exercises, understanding why they're doing it. And to me, we're not, a lot of kids today are continually asking why. And I think, in history, in the 50s, 60s, to ask a question of an adult was, a no-go. You didn't say that. But now the kids of today want to know, and I think it's such a good thing because they're learning, they're understanding, and those successful athletes are the ones who understand it. They're motivated to do it. They want to get back to where they are, and they put their head down and bum up and say, that's what we're going to do. Unfortunately, there are going to be certain injuries that, are not going to help an athlete's career, help them get back to being successful. And, unfortunately, that's life and that's the way it is. But, there are those who you see who are very talented athletes. They get injured. They're talented, but, did they really want to be there at the very beginning? Were they motivated? Were they dedicated to reach the upper echelons of the sport? And if they have been injured, there's a very possible, reason that some of those athletes, were doing it for ulterior motives. They weren't actually doing it to become, that Olympic gold medalist or whatever it might be. And then you look at how they've completed their exercises and their programs, and they've taken shortcuts. They haven't really adhered to, or all the specifics of what they should be doing.
So would you say in some sense injury is like a test of one's motivation for their engaging in their sport?
It's a little bit of a test of what they want to do and what they want to get out of it. How badly do they want to get back to it? How badly do they want to succeed? And again, determining what success means is going to be very different. But for some people, it's a social game. Is success. Based on the severity of the injury.
Right. And, I like your point, Paul. Again, you sort of mentioned that what success is for one athlete may be different. And so being kind of clear on what it is that success means to the athlete sounds like there's value in that, in kind of helping them with their recovery. My last question, if there was one piece of advice that you would offer injured athletes, what would it be?
One piece of advice. I suppose one of it would be, if you get knocked down, how, what, why, who you can help you to get back up. What is it going to take for you to get back up? Right. Understanding all of that, will then set you on the path to, I'm knocked down, but hey, there's no way that this is going to get the better of me. And I'm going to be going full bore, understanding all of that with the right mindset to make sure that I want to get back to there.
Right.
One of the other, I suppose for me, real motivating factors was when I did do the nerve injury on my arm. I had, I suppose, a family friend who had a journal and wrote an article about me. And that article said that I would never make it back. And to me, that was, motivation enough to prove, other people wrong. And that's, we shouldn't be going around in life, trying to prove people wrong, but, to prove to yourself even that, yes, I can make it back.
Yeah. So even though, that, I guess, sort of those frustrations or maybe even kind of detractors can be a powerful source of motivation where, you're trying to, as you say, prove something to yourself or prove to others that you can overcome that which they say you can't.
Yeah. Overcoming adversity. Yeah. Overcoming adversity shows great resilience.
Yeah. And of course, injury certainly is a form of adversity. And I think your point again about kind of how one's going to come back sort of what are the steps, why am I doing this? Again, sort of getting back to that source of motivation and who can help me do this, I think are great points for an injured athlete to really kind of have front and center to help them recovery. So yeah, thank you for your insights and sharing your personal stories. And I really believe athletes who are here, what you're sharing, I think can really benefit from your tremendous experience and knowledge. So yeah, great to speak with you.
No, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity. And you know, if there's one thing that someone can take away from this, well, then it's been success. Someone can learn something from other people's experiences is always a really enlightening piece of information for people.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul.
Thanks, Les.